Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Arell. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about intimacy because I think it's difficult for us as a human population in a world that's filled with contention and social media that doesn't necessarily represent intimacy but rather performance of what seems to be intimacy. And that bothers me a lot. It actually really bothers me. I actually try not to look sometimes because I just want everyone to be more vulnerable to each other. And what I see sometimes on social media is a front to actually avoid vulnerability. Not that one should put vulnerability online, but to be aware of when one is performing versus actually participating in relationship with one another. Now, this topic of tolerating vulnerability is a big one. I think that people fall on a spectrum of their ability to tolerate vulnerability, which probably doesn't sound like rocket science, but at one end of that spectrum, for me, is represented by people who are actually pretty darn afraid of being intimate with other people. And what I mean may have to do with friendship, it may have to do with sexual relationships with others, it may have to do with relationships with parents, depends. But when they're on this far extreme, when there's difficulty with intimacy, it usually represents this fear of being annihilated by the other person. So if you've ever had an event in your life or a relationship where you really loved somebody but felt smothered by them, I think that could be a normal response and have nothing to do with fear of intimacy. But people who have a fear of intimacy that's really intense will feel that all of the time when they get close to someone, like fear of eradication of themselves with the presence of another. Usually there's some trauma history if that's the level of rejection of an intimate relationship. But more moderately, it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to just say, you know, I'm gonna let myself be open to any given relationship and risk the pain that might evolve as a result of my maintaining such vulnerability. And people are not perfect, so sometimes people we love, and maybe even because we love them so much, will actually hurt us. And maybe they don't mean to, but our experiences of being hurt, right? And still, if intimacy is a value, maintaining vulnerability is real important. Another kind of moderate element, I think, of vulnerability is being honest. That's not just honest with someone else, it's being honest with oneself. When we're honest with ourselves, then we can recognize more easily where our vulnerability gets blocked when it's coming from us versus the other person. And what I mean by that is that we recognize where blocks are that we have that might be triggered by the other person, but which really are held within us and they don't belong to the other person. In this quest for intimacy, you like my sweatshirt? Think about the Queen of Hearts. I mean, really, what does that mean, the Queen of Hearts? What does that mean? I'm the Queen of all hearts? No. I'm the Queen of my heart? Yes. My name means crowned with glory, so I really liked this little sweatshirt. To continue, another aspect of intimacy, and I'm not exhausting this on this video, but I think a real important aspect is our listening to the other in an attempt, and this is actually personally important to me, to suspend judgment. When a person is communicating with me, telling me a story, sharing an emotional experience, what my effort is to deeply listen, not think about how I'm going to respond, not think about a story, not even when I'm being consulted with related to things that circulate around trauma. This is especially important. I am really just trying to listen, not judge it, not judge what's around it, not judge the people the person's talking about, not judging the topic the person's talking about. I mean, seriously, just be with that person. Sometimes that's harder than other times. I had a call the other night where it was a pretty intense hour and a half, and it took a lot of time for me to attend, especially because it was online, but it was very easy to listen. And that came from a sustained practice of my own self-reflection, but then also just listening to the words this person was putting out, and then also listening to the body language, and then listening to what is the greater need in this storyline. That leads me to the third point, which gets a little closer, I think, to personal relationships. So real intimate relationships, people you live with, partners, friendships, lovers, parents. And that is, can I think about a we rather than an I? What do I need takes a back seat to what do we need? That's another risk. And in fact, all of this takes risk. When one loves oneself more, I think it's easier to take the risk to be intimate. It is easier to take a risk to say we instead of I. I am not in any way discounting the fear that's involved with that, especially with people who have trauma histories, because if you have a trauma history, especially if that trauma history is located in the family of origin, the fear of we is real high. That means that one really needs to do some work on oneself so that the entering into the we is done with a lot of knowledge and has a high level of awareness of who that we is. So that we needs to be safe, I guess, is part of what I'm saying. But in order to get to intimacy, and I think even joy in relationship, it's pretty necessary to suspend the I and look more at the we. And incidentally, you know, people that use we more in their vocabulary than I actually, and this is proven through research, have fewer heart issues as they age, which is an interesting thought. I wish and hope for all of you that you have a sustained discourse in intimate relationships that last a really long time. Thanks.